up the Thursday edition of News and Views with myself, Salailo Makwidiri, and we're going to be wrapping up the hashtag Heard on Air segment. There was a really important conversation that Inayat Wadi had last night on Wednesday nights with Inayat Wadi, or Wednesday nights in conversation with Inayat Wadi, and it was around Daniel Perez. If you don't know him, there's a really cool, I think, feature that we did on him on social media. Just head over to Salam Media and check it out. It simply gives you a background of where he was born, how he got involved with the IDF, and I think most concerning, how the South African government ultimately helped repatriate his body from Israel back to his parents, and how the president also met with his parents to send his condolences. So there was a wonderful conversation centered around Daniel Perez. Why is South Africa helping him? Why is South Africa helping bring home an IDF soldier? And Inayat Wadi hosted Martin Jansen, executive member of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, and also Paul Hendler, who's a South African Jewish activist, writer, and public commentator. And they chewed the proverbial curd on that conversation and its implications. So if you missed it, take a listen.
I must say that I'm not surprised at all, particularly, excuse me, on the part of the President, Cyril Ramaphosa, and who he is and what he stands for and who he represents. This is not a new phenomenon of the President and the ANC government cozying up to the Zionists in South Africa. As I expressed on several occasions, the odd thing is that, we've been around as solidarity organizations for well over 20 years. We've made efforts to have ourselves heard on very, very important issues, the most recent one being the question of genocide and against Palestinians. And of course, as you mentioned, that there are many South African Zionists who are serving in the Israeli occupation forces, who are participating in that genocide, clearly breaking international law, violating human rights, and committing extreme atrocities. And we've been wanting to get action on the part of the state, particularly the Hawks and the NPA, to prosecute many of these individuals. And up to today, nothing has been done. And many have been asking, why is that the case? And personally, I've been very, very clear that the president, the South African government, is in no way going to antagonize the local Zionists. And this is despite the case that they've taken up with the ICJ against Israel for committing genocide. And we need to understand and unpack why that is the case. And as I said, I think it's best expressed in the individual, the president, who's the head of government, and who he is. And first, he's a billionaire. And we all know that he's not, as commonly referred to, a self-made billionaire. He's a billionaire who benefited by virtue of his political position during the transition from apartheid to the new democratic South Africa, by being closely, as a leader of the ANC, being a key figure in the negotiations with South Africa's apartheid ruling class. And historically, he comes from the mine workers union that had a long relationship in their collective bargaining with white monopoly capital, because mining was the dominant sector, the dominant industry under or during the apartheid years, the apartheid era. So the fraternizing with big capital, white monopoly capital, and Cyril, in particular, as the leader of the National Union of Mine Workers, has a long history. So he's frequented those boardrooms, rubbed shoulders with these people, and during the transition with BEE, Anglo-American initiated BEE, Cyril and the National Union of Mine Workers were major recipients of unbundling of white monopoly capital companies. Johnny comes to mind, part of Anglo-American, and he benefited. And through over the years, being appointed to so many boards as part of BEE processes, he's become a billionaire. So I think the first point I'm making really is that he is closely tied to white monopoly capital, and I would argue that both he and the ANC represent the interest of white monopoly capital by maintaining the status quo in South Africa. And we know that Zionist Jews are disproportionately represented within those sectors of the population who own and control the wealth, namely white monopoly capital, and that is their leverage, the source of their power in South Africa, political influence. And Cyril bows down to that from time to time. So this move on his part, which I felt was quite excessive actually, one could understand maybe if he wants to appease Zionist elements, he might have sent a message to the family. But this meeting with them of his precious time that he never, ever bothers to spend with the solidarity movement, as I said, over decades, South African government leaders haven't bothered to meet with us about critical issues. He spends this time with the family of someone who was actually a criminal, breaking South African law, the Regulation of Foreign Military Assistance Act, and sees the need to meet with him. And for me, that just expresses what this government represents, and specifically their position in relation to Zionists in South Africa, who they refuse to punish despite their criminal acts. And I remember, if I can go on, if you remember last year, I think it was May, the 21st, when Cyril, the president of South Africa, met Donald Trump at the White House. Who was there? It was Johan Rupert, as the key person, as a friend of Trump. Currently, I think the richest man in South Africa, the biggest representative of white monopoly capital, he was there. So for me, it's about appeasing them, and at the same time also the fear to show Donald Trump that, we're not so bad, we're not so anti-Israel, we're a moderate country, etc., etc. It's those kinds of pressures that act on this government and President Cyril Ramaphosa specifically. And for me, that is how I would explain it and analyze it.
Well, thank you for that, Martin, and I think you explained it extremely well and quite in-depth as well. But Paul, just to get your thoughts, and Martin obviously painted this history of Cyril Ramaphosa, white monopoly capital, and the like as well. Does this actually reek of hypocrisy in some way or the other, given that South Africa has been applauded, South Africa has been lauded for its case at the ICJ, and when one sees something like this actually happening, and Martin also alluded to the fact that for someone that committed an illegal act in the country by serving in a foreign army.
I think Martin spelled out the influence, the political influences that are operating from a dominant monopoly class, and also geopolitically. I think he referred to those pressures, and I think, with it, you could say it's hypocritical, but I think what's more interesting is just the political influences and the geopolitical influences that drive this sort of process where the president, as Martin says, meets with a family. There could have been a humanitarian intervention without the president even being involved. Okay, there could have been things that were followed up through other people, And clearly the publicity of the president meeting the family and then announcing this in the public domain is sending a message. And I think Martin's correct in saying that it's a message sort of saying that to the US and to Israel, because the US and Israel are so clearly joined at the hip. You know, if you look at the geopolitical instability that they're both fomenting in West Asia, but sending a message that we sort of trying to sit in the middle of these contending geopolitical forces. And I think it reflects the weakness of the South African government. I think it's fairly fragmented, as we know. I think it reflects the sort of weakness of the ANC. You know, it's been losing electoral support, and I think it's very much of a responding to pressure government. It has very contradictory voices. You know, it goes to the ICJ, but it refuses over a 15 or 16 year period to take any action against very, very explicitly identified and individuals, lone soldiers, volunteers, who Martin has pointed out, you know, have violated our regulation of